That's right.
You've got the captain of the ship that's in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you've got Victor Frankenstein's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting, there's actually the Frankenstein monster's point of view in the story as well.
Right.
And did I feel sorry for the monster? I honestly can't remember because I say it's been so long. But what I do remember is it did not take very long for me to become absorbed in this story. Sometimes, books, it'll take me half the book to be able to really get into it. And it only took a few pages, and I was just absorbed in this book and just read it cover to cover.
Yeah, it's. I found the same thing with it. I mean, it really is a very compelling story, and I think it has a lot of social commentary that is written into it as well. Even though we maybe today might not get it, but I don't know. I mean, I got it, and I've read the book more than once. I think I've probably read it about 4 or 5 times now.
I related to the creature. I mean, Adam, or I related to it because I wasn't always accepted in society. People don't always, people can be very judgmental. And they're very judgmental with the creature. They judge him instantly. That sort of thing, and he terrified people for obvious reasons. So, I thought it was very clever.
Yeah, and I mean, like Ian said, being written from 3 different narratives makes it really interesting because you are getting this feeling of, listening to that person at that moment. So even the creature, like you feel like you're, listening to his plight and his dilemma, and it does kind of, and the other thing I think it was really smart with Mary Shelley is, let's face it, this is a woman in 1818, and she's a young woman when she writes this, right? This is, she's a very young woman when this book is written. It supposedly came from a dream, I believe, was what she had, but she was only 20 at the time. But the one thing that she was able to do in her book was to really capture some of her travels, right? So when she went to Europe, she had extensively traveled and went to Switzerland and Germany and all of these places where they have these big old Gothic castles. And she was really able to bring that into the story and make it believable, because I think what happens is that when you watch a film or you watch, some representations of the story, you don't really get the full picture of where this starts and where it ends up, right? It sort of feels like everything just gets concentrated into Frankenstein's lab, and then the monster goes crazy, and that's sort of the end of the story. But you don't really get the full understanding of, how much she pulled into the novel in terms of her own travel and her own abilities to recant some of the things that she saw as part of the story and as part of the narrative. So I find that really interesting from, a young woman at the age of 20. And I mean, 20 in 1818 was more like 35 today, right? In terms of the way that your mentality was. 20, most women were often married and already had a family. So, the fact that she came from a family that gave her the ability to be able to travel and do these things, I think makes really shows in her story and the way that she wrote it. But the character itself, now I'm going to ask you, and I don't know if you've seen, but there is a play version of Frankenstein. And I don't know if anybody has seen it. I've only seen it on TV. I'm going to say I actually watched the one where Johnny Lee Miller and Benedict Cumberbatch both played. One played the creature, one played Frankenstein, and then they swapped the roles. And then the other played. Oh, it's phenomenal. And
that sounds great. I would love to watch.
I think you can watch it. It's like a BBC. Just go online and type them in and put Frankenstein and their names, and you'll pull it up. It was done maybe 10 years ago, something like that. But it's brilliantly done. They're both excellent in the role, and I think that I ended up preferring Johnny Lee Miller as Frankenstein over Benedict Cumberbatch. I just preferred his performance as the creature. They're both really good, but I thought Benedict was a better Frankenstein and Johnny was a better monster. And that's just my personal opinion, but I think that he brought so many more subtleties. Although Cumberbatch did an amazing job, I found Johnny's creature more I guess I want to say I sympathized with it more. So just his performance in terms of the creature, I felt more drawn to it. But both really excellent performances, done brilliantly on stage and really well done. So the way that they staged it and the script and everything too was brilliant, and they really stuck to the novel. They didn't go off on any modern tangents with it. So it was very, very well done. But if you catch that, it's worth watching. But they did stick to the story, and I think that that's what makes these stories, sort of stick out. And without having read them yesterday, literally, there's some things that, of course, would be lost, in trying to remember what happened. But I was always struck by the creature. And did you guys ever watch Penny Dreadful, the TV series?
No.
No? You talked about it when we did the Penny Dreadfuls episode on the podcast.
Right.
And
now,
you did something about it.
Yeah, and I wasn't a huge fan of the show. The first season I did enjoy. It kind of just, like some of those shows, they have the best of intentions, but they don't have the script writers. And so it just, visually it looked really cool, and it looked like it should have went somewhere more than it ever did. But they introduced a character by the name of John Clare. And John Clare, if maybe you are familiar or not familiar, was a poet in Victorian times. And a very, very good poet. But they made him Frankenstein's monster. So they gave him the name of John Clare. He, it wasn't that it was John Clare as Frankenstein, but the creature had took the name John Clare. But the creature also, too, had a very soft side and loved poetry and loved. So it was very almost Phantom of the Opera meets Frankenstein's monster But it was my favorite character on the entire show.
Well, I've not seen the play you were talking about. I'm more of a cinema kind of person. Mm-hmm. And, of course, there's been a million Frankenstein movies produced.
There has.
Over the years, from Universal Studios and the old British Hammer horror films.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 1994 version of Frankenstein that starred Robert De Niro as the monster. And
okay.
This movie is actually considered to be the most accurate adaptation of a film from the book. And it's actually one of my favorite films of Frankenstein. And unfortunately, though, other than myself, I guess a lot of other people didn't like it because it did not do well at the box office.
Okay.
But, it's, in my opinion, it is the best version I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah, I'm just looking it up. So Kenneth Branagh was the director on it, and it had Helena Bonham Carter, Tom Holtz. Yeah. So, Robert De Niro. Interesting cast. Not one that I would readily go, Like, I can see Helena Bonham Carter and Kenneth Branagh together, but then you introduce Tom Hulce, who, of course, most people would know as Amadeus in the film Amadeus. Brilliant actor, but didn't do a whole lot after that. And then you kind of got De Niro as the monster, which I guess I don't know. Maybe I'll have to check it out just to see.
His performance is really good.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to watch
monster, it's fantastic, in my opinion.
Okay, I'll check it out. I've not even seen that version, so, and that's why I love this show. Because we get introduced to things that we haven't seen or talked about previously, and that, that's the beauty of having more than one person, right? Is that we can, Rachel, do you have sort of a favorite version? Like, do you prefer the book? Have you seen movies? Have you?
Of Frankenstein?
Like Frankenstein films, yeah.
I like the play.
I love the play too.
It was a long time ago that I saw the play, but yes, I like the play.
The play is very well done, I have to admit, right? It's pretty cool. So I'm looking right now, because Ian had brought up about films, so I'm looking at a list of films that have had Frankenstein's monster in them. So are you guys ready for this? Because it's pretty extensive, and I kind of want to go down the whole list. Okay, so some of them are actual movies, some it's just an appearance, right? So we have in 1910 an actual film, Frankenstein. And then, so that obviously was black and white, 1910 horror film, directed by J. Searle Dawley, Dawley, that's his name. It was a one-reeler screenplay that they brought to the screen. So very cool. Oh, and I have seen this creature before. So interesting. It was featured on the cover of Edison's Kinetogram in March 15th, 1910. So there's an oldie for you. That's the first appearance. So that's just a little under 100 years later. And then we have Life with Soul in 1915, The Monster of Frankenstein in 1920, Frankenstein in 1931. And, of course, we are all familiar with that one because that is Boris Karloff, right?
Right.
So,
right. And squared off head, and the two bolts sticking out of his neck. Yeah. That's it.
And that really, I think, was the movie that propelled Frankenstein into the the culture, like into pop culture, if you want to, right? Was his version of Frankenstein. We have Mickey's Gala Premiere, so a Mickey Mouse cartoon in 1933. Toyland premiere, also Bride of Frankenstein, of course, which, how can we not love the old Bride of Frankenstein? There's a number of cartoons, Hollywood Capers, Have You Got Any Castles? Then they did Son of Frankenstein in 1939. So this is where we're seeing now this, remember I was talking earlier about horror films. You start to get the spin-offs, right, and the multiples. So we've got Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and then Son of Frankenstein. Then Hell's a Poppin', of course, in 1941, which was a bizarrely strange and awesome film. The Ghost of Frankenstein, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, because you got to have
those crossovers. Yeah.
That was the crossover. House of Frankenstein, which was, again, Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney. And then House of Dracula. So now we're bringing them all into it, right? You've got Dracula, you've got Wolfman, you've got Frankenstein. So you had them all in there. And that was, the cast of everybody that was popular at the time. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which was 1948. That was funny. It was fun. The Curse of Frankenstein, which was a British Hammer horror film in 1957. I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, which, of course, apparently it was a double feature that played in 1957 with Blood of Dracula, and the follow-up, which was I Was a Teenage Werewolf, which again became another, sort of remake. Frankenstein 1970, which is weirdly a 1958 science fiction horror film starring Boris Karloff.